Hi guys, and welcome to today's video where I am teaming up with Meghan from Happy Tales. She recently got a new leopard gecko and we figured we'd do a video together where we go through the most common questions that new owners have about their leopard gecko. Because you can do as much research as you like, but just sometimes you have those questions like, is this normal? So over to Meghan for the first question.
Question number 1. Why is my leopard gecko spending so much time in his warm hide?
This is actually really normal. I think a lot of people get concerned because all their gecko seems to be doing is sleeping and just on the heat mat, and they're like, don't they do anything more? They will sleep throughout the day. They'll be very lazy, they'll be asleep on the heat mat in the warm hide, and there's actually nothing wrong with that. You'll find they'll be a little more active at night, but at first they might still be getting used to their environment, so they might not come out so much when you're about.
Question number 2. Why won't my leopard gecko go into his warm hide?
So in complete contrast to the previous question, I do commonly get people ask why their geckos won't go in the warm hide. Now there are a few reasons. Firstly, if you don't have a thermostat, your heat mat might not be set correctly, so it might be too hot or even too cold. And so the gecko can't distinguish between a cold hide and a warm hide because it's just cold, or it's just too hot that the gecko can't bear, so it ends up in a cold hide. So I would recommend getting a thermostat and making sure your whole heating situation is sorted out way before you get a leopard gecko. However, if it is particularly warm where you are, I've noticed this in like when we've had really hot days, my geckos will go and sleep in the cold hide just to cool down. And also something that can occur is if the tank's too big or your gecko just hasn't found its heat mat yet, it may keep going in the cold hide, and when you pick it up you can tell it's freezing. So I would say introduce it to its warm hide. It might just be that it hasn't noticed it yet, it hasn't found it. I don't really know what Minnie's doing here, but I have done a whole video on the cold hide situation, so check that out.
Question number 3. If I pick up my leopard gecko, will his tail fall off?
So this question gets asked to me quite a lot, and I understand where it comes from. I think I was the same when I first got Gizmo. I thought as soon as I'm going to hold her, her tail's going to shoot off or something, and I was so worried. I thought, oh my god, if she gets spooked, it's going to come off. Oh, 11 years later, it's nearly 11 years later, this tail is still intact. And I would say as long as you pick them up, I'd suggest the scoop technique. That works well. If you see my other taming videos, the tail just doesn't drop off for no reason. Obviously if you grab the tail, if the gecko's extremely stressed out and you keep messing with it, something like that could happen. But I would say most of the time they're not going to drop their tail unless they're in some serious danger.
Question number 4. How often should I feed my gecko?
So this also gets asked to me quite often, but I have done a video on this, how much, how often. A lot of the common questions are answered in my FAQ Friday playlist, so I'd highly recommend you check that out.
Question number 5. Can you tell me how old my leopard gecko is and what morph it is?
This question gets asked me so much, but unfortunately I have no clue. I would say to you, if knowing the age of your gecko and the morph of your gecko is very important to you, don't get it from a pet shop who doesn't record that kind of things. You can go to Petco and they'll tell you your gecko is a fancy gecko. I can tell you now that is not a morph. They literally say that because they have no clue what it is and they want to make the animal sound fancy enough for you to buy. Obviously this here is Gizmo and she is a wild type, so this is sort of your basic look, although she does also have high yellow and jungle in her, but they aren't morphs either. And once again, I would recommend checking out my genetics and breeding video because then you'll understand how complex morph is and why a pet shop one might not necessarily just have its own morph. It could be a mix of anything. And knowing its age can depend on its pattern development. If you ever seen a picture of Gizmo when she was younger and as she ages, her spots will break up and develop into this. But it's, for me, I can't tell you by a picture. I'm really not that qualified. So if that is important to you, instead of trying to ask someone, just go to a breeder so you know all that information beforehand.
Question number 6. Why is my gecko getting spooked every time I try to pick him up?
So this is quite a common one, and I know a few reasons this can occur. Firstly, obviously it's a new environment, the gecko's probably a little bit on edge, but it can also be down to how you approach the tank. So for example, if I just went along and went like that, although Diego's used to that, if that was a new gecko, that can make quite a bit of sound and scare it, just to make it like, oh, what's going on? Also, I find that people have tanks that open at the top and they have to reach down and get it. To a gecko, that can seem like a predator reaching down, so that can kind of spook it. And also, if you're really quiet and suddenly make a sound, even with these old ones, even with the ones that are so used to me, if I'm really quiet and there's suddenly a sound, they can flip out. So I always have a sound that I work with all my geckos and all my animals with, and it's simply... And whenever I do that, it's like my signature. They know who I am, they know what's going on, and it puts them at ease. I've had geckos that get spooked and wag their tail, and as soon as I do that, the tail goes down and they're relaxed. So if you establish something like that very early on, they'll start to realise, actually, this is a safe sound, this means something's fine, and it might take a little bit of work, but they certainly get used to it.
Number 7, can I get my gecko a friend?
So this here is Diego, and he's a male. And under no circumstances, if you have a male, can you get your male a friend. 2 males cannot live together. I have seen horrendous injuries from 2 males interacting. A male and female cannot live together, no matter what people tell you. I recently got a message from someone who said that a pet shop had convinced them, even though they did their research, they had convinced them that a boy and girl could live together. If they'd lived together all their life, they wouldn't be attracted to each other, which does not work out. And the 2 geckos weren't particularly old, and he found them mating, and he's had to go out and get separate setups for them. And this is something that I'm very passionate about, because no matter what a pet shop says, you should not house 2 males together or a male and female together. 2 females can occasionally live together, but it doesn't always get on. You might have one that's a bit too dominant, and also you don't want to have one go out and buy another one, just shove it in the tank, because that probably won't work out well. I did a whole video on this, so I recommend you check it out.
Number 8, what heating mat do you use?
I get this question a lot, and I've always used the same kind. It is 6 by 11 inches, 7 watt Habitat heat mat. It's always the way I go. You want a heat mat that covers 1/3 to 1/2 of the tank. I usually go for 1/3 of the floor space, and that's always worked for me.
Question number 9. I don't think that my leopard gecko is drinking water. What should I do?
So you'll put out water in your water dish and notice it looks like hardly any of it's gone, and you'll never probably see your gecko near that water dish. All I will say is they are most likely drinking, you just miss it, because I don't really know, even all this time I've had geckos, I don't know exactly how many times they drink. I might occasionally see mine drink, but a lot of the time they're very, very secretive. They'll probably do it at night. They actually sit there for quite a while drinking and tipping their head back, but they are probably drinking. If it does concern you that they're looking kind of dehydrated, you could pop them in a little plastic box and spray some water, and maybe they'll lick some of the droplets up. But just be aware that they do usually drink, you just probably have missed it.
Question number 10. Why is my gecko not eating?
So this one is really common because when a gecko moves into a new environment, it's going to be slightly stressed. It might not eat straight away. To be honest, when I first get a leopard gecko or any kind of gecko, I don't expect it to eat straight away. So when it does, it's always a nice surprise. But I would give it a day or two and it might not eat. It has to just get comfortable. Obviously, once again, I'm going to bring up a pet shop that is notorious for not selling geckos in the best health. If you did get one from there, if you did rescue it because it's in a very bad state, it might be worth going to the vets, because if you think this gecko is ill, it could have a parasite, and as much as you're trying to feed your gecko and it's not eating or it's puking it up, it might be battling a parasite, and it might be best to get that fixed before trying to shove food down its throat. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Hopefully it has cleared up a few of your queries about your new gecko. Thank you to Megan for helping make this video, and if you want to check out the video I made with her, I'll leave that at the end, and obviously check out her channel. She has so many amazing pets. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and goodbye.